morning. Excuse me. We're back with Gardening 101, Part 8, and today we're going to talk about beneficial insects, or at least a few of the beneficial insects that you would like to welcome to your garden. And I do mean you want to welcome them to your garden. We're also going to take a closer look at a few of the ways to extend your garden season. Garden friends. There are a lot of garden friends out there. Actually, despite all the insects that we mentioned as garden pests in Part 7, most of the garden insects are friends of yours, or at least wise they don't damage your plants. Can you see the garden friends in this picture? In the top, you see a dragonfly. These are great predators, dragonflies and damselflies. In the top right, you see a praying mantis in the leaves there on that shrub, and these are great predators. You see in the middle of the screen a hummingbird. This is a great little pollinator, but also they eat, the little hummingbirds eat some insects themselves, but they also feed insects to their young. So they can get a lot of insects out of your garden. And on the bottom right, there's a honeybee. Bees, there are many different types of bees around, and definitely they're all good pollinators. You want your bees in there. And on the bottom left, hidden in the grasses, you'll find one of those nasty scorpions. But they also are very good predators, and they're out there at night when you're not around. Okay, our first friend of the garden, we all know the ladybug, sometimes called lady beetles and various other names. And they have many different patterns and colors. You can see two different colors and patterns on the left of your screen there. But they are great eaters of aphids, mites, and scale. This is probably the most widely available beneficial insect if you want to purchase them. Basically, all they need is some insects and some pollen to survive. And they're happy to help out your garden there. Their favorite plants for pollen are those with nice flat flowers. And they tend to like white and yellow flowers, but they'll go to other colors too. You can also use trap plants like dill for encouraging the aphids to go to that plant instead of your other plants. And once there's a whole colony of aphids, they exude a scent that a ladybug can detect. And so the ladybug comes in and says, dinner is ready, and goes to work eating them. Now here we see on the right, the upper right, this is a ladybug larva. If you see these little guys, just encourage them in your garden. They are eating aphids as fast as they can gather them up. On the upper left is a ladybug pupa. This is after the larval stage. The little pupa goes, and then the ladybug hatches out of that. And in the bottom center, you can see a couple of ladybugs making more ladybugs, and these are wonderful to have in the garden. Scyphid flies. These are often called hover flies, sometimes flower flies, but scyphid flies are wonderful little insects. You'll see them kind of hovering around. They look like little tiny bees. They have little yellow and black stripes on their abdomens. And you can see there's one on the upper left there. On the bottom left is a scyphid fly larva. The larvas look a little maggoty, but they tend to be transparent. You can actually kind of see their internal organs. Both of these guys love to eat all those insects in your garden. So definitely encourage these little guys also. Here's an adult scyphid fly. You can see the white egg in the center top, and again, top right and bottom right, or bottom left, there are two larvas. Because there are different varieties and species, they come in different colors, the larvae do. And you can see a pupa down there on the bottom right. Praying mantids, these are always neat to watch. They will bite if you disturb them and pick them up and frighten them, but they're not venomous. The bite might make you say ouch, but it will also make you let go of the insect. They have very good insect vision. Most insects they see to the side, but these guys have eyes very much like ours. They have 3D vision, so they can track and focus very well on prey and go out and get it with their front legs. They can take pretty big insects, especially in comparison to their own size, and large praying mantids have been known to take hummingbirds, small hummingbirds, but by and large, these are guys you want in your yard. Most of the time they sit there and wait for something to come by and ambush it. There are a few species that actually will stalk their prey. But most of the time they're just sitting there waiting, and they can camouflage themselves very well. They only live for about a year, and in the bottom left of your screen you see an egg case. If you see this egg case in your garden, leave it there and look forward to seeing some praying mantids. Bees are wonderful pollinators. I know some people are allergic to them, but they are critical to our whole food chain of supply. At least 75% of the plants that we eat or eat the fruit of are requiring pollination by a bee in the United States. And actually 80% of all flowering plants require some type of bee pollination. Like I said, there are hundreds of different types of bees, and they can range from little tiny, almost invisible bees to bumblebees, which are pretty doggone big. And these are pollinators. They all are good pollinators. Our native bees are actually even harder working pollinators than the honeybee is. Some of our native bees are mason bees and things like that. They will be out in weather that a honeybee says, nah, not me. So encourage all types of bees in your garden. And again, this little book on bees is excellent. And I hear our Charlot library is going to order it, so definitely it will be there for reference also. So how do you tell a bee from a fly? Because I mentioned hoverflies are indeed flies, not bees. Well, here you see three pictures, and you can see a honeybee, a carpenter bee, which is almost as big as a bumblebee, and a little hoverfly. Now the hoverfly is going to be the smallest of the group, but notice the antenna. The hoverfly has very short, little itsy-bitsy antenna, whereas the two bees have antennas that have a bend. They kind of have an elbow in them. And that's probably the easiest way to tell the difference between a bee and a fly is by the antenna. Yes, bees have 4 wings and flies have 2 wings, but you know that's hard to see. I go by the antenna, and that's the easiest way to tell a bee from a fly. Lacewings, another wonderful little garden insect. These are generally pretty small, up to 3/4 of an inch, but you will know them because most of them are green. There are some brown, but most of the ones we see are green, and they have these lovely long wings that are longer than their body, and they're a very fine, lacy little, delicate looking wing. They usually have long antennae and gold eyes. Now, the larvae, which you see at the top left of your screen, they look a little bit, some people think they look like alligators. They kind of like that maybe, but they're a very voracious feeder. If it comes into their their line of sight and their ability to catch, they will eat it, including their siblings. At the bottom of the screen, you can see some of the eggs. The eggs are on little stalks, and many times you'll see these eggs on leaves. You'll see this little stalk with a little white thing on top, and that's a lacewing egg. The eggs are laid on stalks so that as the egg hatches, the little larva falls to the ground and crawls away looking for food. And that helps to keep them from eating all their siblings. If all those eggs were laying together, the first one to hatch would eat all the others. So they're just insatiable predators. They're actually great. You can see on your screen, each one will eat 200 other insects per week. So if you have several dozen of these guys around, it's going to help your garden a lot. They prey on all types of things. You can see the list there on your screen of the insects that they eat. And basically, if it's not too big and they can catch it, they'll eat it. Good little guys. Assassin bugs, these are fairly good-sized bugs. And again, they'll either sit and wait to ambush it, or they'll actually go out and stalk and kill it. Now it has, you can see on the bottom, there you can see a side view. It has this long proboscis. Actually, it's called a rostrum, and this is what it uses to stab its victim, and then as it stabs its victim, it injects juices that liquefy the inside of that insect, and it sucks them out. So it is a very, very good predator. Don't play with them. Kind of like the mantids, they're not poisonous, but they will bite if they're disturbed and frightened. And they probably have a little more painful bite than what the mantid would have. So definitely leave them alone, watch them from a distance. They come in many different colors and shapes. You can see in the center of your screen on the left, there's one that kind of has a little hump on his back, and that's called a wheel assassin bug. You probably won't see him too often. Most of the ones we have here look like the guys on the top of your screen there. But definitely very, very good guys to have in the garden. Now let's look a little bit at expanding our garden season. There's all kinds of ways we can do this. I think probably every gardener would love to have a greenhouse. Greenhouses can be from put it together, do it yourself at the bottom right of the screen with leftover windows and things like that. You can have them attached to your house, like the one on the upper left, a little greenhouse kind of just standing against the side of a house, all the way up to the palatial things like the bottom of your screen there. From several $100s really to several $100,000. Just depends on what you want and how much money you got. There are things to consider before going into a greenhouse because you're going to be spending a fair amount of money one way or another. Do you really need a greenhouse? What are you really going to grow in it? I myself would love to have a greenhouse, but I really don't need one. I don't need one at all. Also, does your city or your county, or especially your HOA, do they have any regulations against that? What kinds of permits are you going to need to put that structure up? And again, along with, do you really need a greenhouse? How big of a one do you really need? Do you need one that's 25 foot long, 12 foot tall, and 15 foot wide, or can something that's 6 by 8 do? You have to give some serious thought to this. And again, do you want a standalone greenhouse or one that is attached to your house, kind of like a lean-to? So consider these questions carefully before investing in a greenhouse. Now, a greenhouse has lots of advantages. You can go ahead and get those plants started really early in the year. Under some circumstances, if you have the right equipment, heating and ventilation and such, you can grow all year round in a greenhouse. You can also grow tropical plants that you can't otherwise grow in the greenhouse. Maybe you would like to grow orchids or even citrus. You can grow those all year round in a greenhouse, provided that you have the proper equipment. Some of the disadvantages: cost. That's a biggie right there. And if you're going to do year-round growth, you're going to have to look at a heating system, a ventilation system, and some type of watering system. So those all add to the cost considerably. You might also need to add a lighting system. You might, probably will, have an increase in your utility bills. And remember, a greenhouse is pretty much a closed environment. So you're going to have a problem with pollination. You're going to need to bring in some pollinators. I know some of the commercial greenhouses, they actually have mason bee homes in them so that those little bees can do the pollination work. Otherwise, you're going to have to hand pollinate, which is a lot of work. Also, in a closed environment, and a very nice moist environment at that, you can very probably have some pests in there that you're going to have to deal with, just as if you would deal with them out in the garden. And a few more questions on greenhouses. There are a lot of different possibilities for covering. You can have plexiglass, you can have real glass, and some greenhouses even are covered with a very heavy plastic. So you have to make that decision, and these will affect the cost of your greenhouse. Again, that heating system. If you're going to grow year-round up here, you're going to need a heating system. Could you do it a passive solar system? Sure. Again, that's going to add to your cost. And that ventilation system, unless you have a manual ventilation system that you open yourself, it's more convenient to go ahead and have the automatic one. As it gets to a certain temperature, the vents open automatically. Another cost. And if this greenhouse of yours is in the sun, you might need to add shade cloth over the top of it in the summer to bring the temperatures down a little bit and to shade some of those plants that might not otherwise need a whole lot of sun. Irrigation, are you going to water it all by hand? If it's a big greenhouse, that's going to take a lot of time. So there might be some type of automatic irrigation system that you will have in there. And finally, do you want to have it in raised beds or do you want to have it in the ground? Either one can work with a greenhouse. Now, high tunnels are kind of cousins to greenhouses, pretty close cousins as a matter of fact. You can see several of them on the screen here. These are generally a little cheaper than a greenhouse, but pretty much the same amount of work and certainly permits that you will need. This looks very familiar because it's the same thing we talked about with greenhouses. Do you really need one? Most important, does the HOA or your city or allow them, and what types of permits are needed? These are big structures, even small ones, so you will most likely need a permit to use them or to put them in. Do you really need one? What are you going to grow? Standalone or an attached high tunnel? Those are the same questions we looked at with the greenhouse. The advantages are pretty much the same. Again, You can grow and start plants way ahead of schedule than what you would out in your yard. The disadvantages are pretty much the same also, except there's a new one in there. You can see it's in green, replacement of covering. Generally, the covering that you have on a high tunnel will need to be replaced periodically, and that depends on how thick. High tunnel coverings are in mils, M-I-L-S, and it tells you how thick. The thinner the mil of your covering, the more often it's going to need to be replaced, and the more likely it will be damaged in a hailstorm or a windstorm. So if you're looking at a high tunnel, get the heaviest covering that you can afford. Other than that, you've got pretty much the same advantages and disadvantages for a high tunnel as you have with a traditional greenhouse, except the cost is probably just a little bit lower. And again, same questions to consider as with a greenhouse, with the addition of what mil will that plastic covering be? And that, of course, affects the cost. Heavier ones cost more. Low tunnels. These are great. I use low tunnels in my garden, and I think they're the best way for most home gardeners to go. You can see several on here. Things to consider again, how about your HOA? Generally, cities and counties, they don't care about low tunnels. Most HOAs don't care about low tunnels, but there are a few that do. So make sure that you check with your HOA before you put in any low tunnels. Very affordable. That's one of the things most people like. Again, you can start plants in them way ahead of the normal season. And because you have these little hoops, as you recall, you can put shade cloth over those hoops for things like lettuce and spinach to give them a little shade from our summer sun. So they can serve a double purpose there. You still might need some type of irrigation or watering system. And probably the biggest disadvantage, you can't stand up in them. You could see the lady is the low tunnel comes about to waist high. So you don't really go into them, you pull the sides up and tuck them back. Cold frames, again, does your HOA have any problems with cold frames? Usually not, because cold frames are low and they're pretty easy to hide around the garden. Again, you're going to need some type of ventilation system. You're going to have to close them at night and open them during the day. And there are some that have automatic ventilators. You can spend a fair amount of money for a fancy kit, or you can do it yourself. Basically, they're a movable frame. Most of them you can move from place to place, which is very good, but some of them are in one place and that's it. They're built into the ground, so to say. They're very affordable, and generally, if you have the movable ones especially, those are the best because you can start your plants here, and when these little guys are ready to go, you can pick your cold frame up and move it over and start a second group of plants. And so that's very handy. However, they can be very heavy, so that could be a disadvantage for you. And when they're not in use, they take up a lot of extra space. There are other alternatives. We talked a little bit about these briefly. The old plastic milk carton is great. You put it into the soil and take the top off for ventilation. If it's going to be a cold night, you put the top back on. This picture on the lower right shows making a little flap down here instead of just cutting it off straight so that you can pin it to the ground. You can also just stick a piece of bamboo through the top and let it stick out, and that will kind of hold it in place. Another thing that you can use, just some of these little plastic containers. Again, it's got a top. You can put it in there. You could go ahead again and put a couple pieces of bamboo stakes in there to hold it so that it doesn't blow in the wind. When night comes, you can put this on. I've used these for some of my tomato plants, and they're very good. The final thing, this is what we call a wall of water. You can see here that it's circular, and you can see that there's little channels all through here. So you put this around your plants, fill it with water, and it makes a wall of water. The water, of course, heats up during the day, and at night, if it's going to be cold, you can actually pull these tops together with a couple clothespins, and this will give you 16 degrees of protection for your young tomato plants. I use these all the time in my garden for my tomato and pepper plants to get them started early and protect them from frost and cold. You can buy these at any of the hardware or big box stores. You can order them online. You can use them for many, many years. So don't think that you'll buy them and use them for one summer. They will last you many years. And that's about the end of our part 8 here. We will look at doing some things in the future, but this is the end of the Gardening 101 series from the White Mountain Community Gardens, and we want to thank Show Low TV and the Show Low Library and for promoting and sponsoring the White Mountain Community Garden. Certainly come out to the garden and visit us. We're there on 9th Place in Show Low most Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. So come out and visit us. Gardeners, visitors are always welcome. We'll answer your questions, and we'll look at doing some more of these series in the future. And thank you for tuning in.